Cannabis Common Sense, the show that tells the truth about marijuana and the politics behind its prohibition.
Without further ado, here is the Emperor of Hemp himself. Now, back in 1981, he was selling some glass near Van Nuys in California when I first met him with his partner, Captain Ed Adair. And then in '84, Jack came up and started helping here in Oregon with the Oregon Marijuana Initiative, which made the ballot. Jack was instrumental in helping get the petition campaign out then, and at that period, he wrote a paper. At first, it was called the CMI White Paper. The CMI White Paper, I first saw it in 1981 in a magazine called Overthrow. Overthrow was put out by the Yippies in Washington, D.C. At that point, I was a contact in Overthrow as an Evergreen State College student up in Washington. I distributed the magazine, and I went down to L.A. to try to get on some trivia game shows in 1982. And while I was there, I looked in Overthrow, and there were the Reefer Raiders in L.A. So I went and hooked up with the Reefer Raiders, and that's how I met Jack for the first time. In 1985, he was putting together his book, the first edition, and that was before the age of computers. So it was all cut and paste with typewriters and pictures and scissors and paste. And he had 3 little kids at the time, and I lived a few blocks away from him in a grow house nearby. And he needed a place to put it together. So I was happy to offer him that space, and he put together the very first edition of The Emperor Wears No Clothes right here in Portland back in 1985. And now he sold 700,000 copies. I had no idea at first, but it doesn't surprise me. Here's Jack Harrer and Eddie Lepp.
In 1984, I came up here with 17 days to go in the ballot initiative period for getting signatures. We were 45,000 short, and everybody was leaving. They think the road parade doesn't go far enough. With 3 other people, we came up and we bought 46,000 signatures. We put it on the ballot in 17 days. And then, about 1 month after they said we make the ballot, they said we missed it by 150 signatures.
Right here? No, it'll be
out of 100,000 signatures.
What's your name?
And they said we didn't make the ballot. And we went and sued them to the court, and we did make the ballot. We have the signatures. But they said, well, it's too late to get on the ballot. Next time. But we made the ballot. Well, that is the way it tumbles. 1 year later, we went out. In 90 days, we made the ballot. And we have 250 days to the next election. We made the ballot in about 90 days, and we about 40%. I don't remember what it was in 1986, but I went up there to the ballot over and over and over until we put it on the ballot here in 1998 for medical. Now, I'll tell you, we came all over this country and all over in this. We have the most wonderful people living in Oregon that I have ever seen. But you got to go on the ballot again because we got to make pot legal to grow 100% of the time for 100% of the reason. Nobody has ever died from smoke except they were shot by a cop. Nobody. You get 2 years longer on life if you smoke every morning, noon, and night all their life. And you won't believe me, nobody will tell me a liar because we have $100,000 thing if you can prove me wrong. 30% of all medicine in the whole world was made out of cannabis for 5,000 years until 100 years ago. You know, I had a stroke 6 years ago, and for about 2 years I can't speak. I can speak now a little bit. 100 years ago, 95% of all clothing in the world was made out of hemp, and then came cotton. And now they don't remember hemp. When you go into a school for a kindergarten to college, they don't remember hemp. All the sails and all the ships were made out of hemp. 100% the same hemp you smoke. The same hemp. 95% of all sails and ropes were made out of hemp. 2,000 years ago, 200 years ago, in 1800, there was the U.S. Constitution, Old Ironsides, and it cost $50,000 to build Old Ironsides out of wood. But then they have to cover it with sails and rope, and it cost $400,000 in those monies, in those times, 200 years ago, to sell the sails and the ropes out of hemp. And they need it all replaced. In 2 years more, they have $400,000 to replace the sails and ropes again. 95% of all clothing, all windows, all bed sheets, all rugs were made out of hemp. They never taught me that in school. I didn't know that when I was growing up. I always thought it was cotton, cotton, cotton. I didn't know about hemp. This is we are in the freest country in the world, and we don't have hemp in our schools. All of these people out there are members of the Parents Teachers Association. Go out there and said, we want real history, real geography taught in schools. 95% of all clothing and drugs, 30% of all medicines, 95% of all paper was made from hemp until 125 years ago. To the library in the old section, those are hemp paper. all of it. It's not wood. And it will be all the paper for the whole world again without ever cutting down another tree. Houses. And we can do it out of hemp instead of wood. And all together, for 200 or 300 years, get to the trees to grow and grow and grow. And it will be covered again with hemp. And trees and hemp will cover the earth. We make the finest oil made naturally from hemp. The finest fuel.
They rot their minds and bodies with white lightning, strewing highways with slaughters of the drunks, while the cops are busy raiding bedrooms of the marijuana smoking leftist punks. I'm glad I'm not an Okie from Muskogee, where the mind and the conscience are asleep, frightened and kept ignorant from childhood. Is it any wonder that they act like sheep? The local campus hero is the jockstrap, scholarship and brand new shiny car, making business good for the abortionist who pays the sheriff who runs the local bar. Nixon, Mitchell, Agnew were their heroes, and the Indochina War a holy cause. The Weddow's flags on our dead sons' pine boxes repay us for a war outside the laws. Same goddamn thing is happening again. I myself am a medical cannabis user, and once upon a time I was with the federal government. I was in charge of the marijuana research project for the National Institute of Mental Health until they discovered what my attitudes were on the product. And I was cast out from the federal government, and I went to California, where I started my practice in psychiatry. There I participated in different cannabis reform activities. I was on the steering committee of Proposition 19. Back in 1972, the California Marijuana Initiative.
I tell a little story. I've told it a lot, and I'll tell you guys it real quick, and perhaps you'll understand then why I do what I do. Many years ago, I went to this little shithole in Southeast Asia called Vietnam, and it screwed up my head real bad. So for about 15 years, I didn't really give a shit about my wife or my kids or my family or anything else. And then one day I had a realization that if I didn't change my life, I was going to die. And so about 17 or 18 years ago now, I got sober. That I would devote the rest of my life to promoting the sacred plant at every level, both as a medicinal and as a industrial product. And that I would dedicate myself to helping those less fortunate. My wife and I started a ministry in 2000. In 2002, we were raided where they got 658 kilos, I believe. And nobody was arrested. We figured we were safe. The next year, we planted over 1,000 plants, which we harvested safely. And the following year, they came in and raided us, and then the following spring, they came and raided us again. Now, the reason I tell you this background is because I've based my entire defense. I'm facing 4 life sentences, $17 million in fines, an additional 40 years, and the part that really makes my balls ache, a $600 spatial assessment. They get to 17 fucking million, they can wait on the 600. Anyway, We have based our entire defense on the Religious Freedoms Restoration Act, which allows for the use of marijuana as a holy sacrament. And for 2 years, I've been trying to get this in front of a judge, and the federal government, the judge, even my own attorneys have all conspired against me at every level to keep this argument from going in front of a court. There was a recent decision by the Supreme Court called the UDV decision, which is incredibly critical because it has to do with the church drinking what they call Waitusca tea, which, comparing marijuana to that tea, is like comparing ice water to battery acid. The Supreme Court said in a 9-0 vote, leave them boys alone. Now, if they can let people French kiss rattlesnakes, drink cyanide, drink a tea that they import in 50-gallon drums from Brazil, then I am having a lot of trouble wondering why they are so hesitant to put a marijuana case in front of the judge. They tell me it's because I would be what they refer to as a gateway case, which means that if I won and you guys all joined my church, we'd all be sitting here smoking pot right now instead of about wondering about looking over your shoulder. You'd be able to do whatever you wanted. They couldn't stop it. And that's why my case is on hold. Now, it looks like they're going to probably dismiss all of my charges, but they're going to do it under bad warrants so they don't ever have to address the religious issue. For those of you that are disappointed, this is where the story gets interesting. My wife, who is as bald as a baby fucking bird and weighs less than 100 pounds, 4 months ago told me that she had to do something before she died to make things right.
Oh, yeah?
And so she went down and she started her own ministry because I couldn't do it through the one that we had started together because of the legal problems I already had. She turned around at that time and sued the Attorney General of the United States, the Attorney General of the State of California, the Governor of the State of California, all of the DE agents and the National Guard, the Highway Patrol and Sheriff's agents involved in her fucking raids. Right now she has, I'm not sure, but somewhere in the neighborhood of 35,000 plants planted back in our garden. And so far they have come in and done nothing. I cannot tell you what an honor it is to have Jack Herrera for a best friend, but that pales by comparison the honor I have of having Linda for a wife. She personally is taking this to them in such a way they will have to address the religious consequences of this. And once it's settled, it will be legal across the board. I know Jack sometimes has a little trouble getting the message out because of his stroke, but in a nutshell, what he said was hemp will save the world. If you will study the history of hemp and marijuana, you will find that it is the mainstay product that has sustained this world for over 25,000 years that we can prove in black and white. I said this last month in Seattle at the Hemp Fest, and I say it to you now. I promise you, if we will all stand up just one fucking time together, we will never have to stand up again. 70% of the Republicans in a national survey admitted that they smoked pot and had no problem with marijuana as a medicine. That's 70% of the people that fucking hate us, you guys. Can't we get the rest of us on board with that? You know? Let's stand up. Let the people that we elect know that they are our servants. And that means that they kneel at our feet, not rip out our throat and bite our hands. We pay them. It used to be serve and protect. Now it's screw and prosecute. It's right in the Constitution. Have any of you ever read that? If it's a victimless crime, there can be no jail time. How many of you people sitting out there today know somebody in jail that didn't hurt fucking anybody? Huh? Come on, put your hands up. Most of the crowd. Read the Constitution. The other thing Jack said that's imperative is you have to know your rights. You have to understand the laws, and you have to understand your rights under the laws. And the best thing that we can do is vote. The NAACP, the NRA, the multitude of national organizations that create voting blocks control elections.
you are the guys and gals to get pot legal. 100% legal for getting in all your clothing, all your paper, all of everything, and make things illegal. Well, you get my message. For 33 years I've been doing this, and I'm 67 years old, and I love doing this because this is the way people and the United States of America and all the people of the world should go. Hemp, hemp, hooray.
So, come about 1910, this guy named Schlittiken, according to research by Don Wirtschafter, started inventing a machine that was like the cotton gin. It dropped the labor involved in hemp to 100-fold from its previous price. It went from, I think, 50 cents a pound to half a cent a pound. And hemp became incredibly inexpensive. And when that happened, the petrochemical industry was just starting to synthesize petroleum to be like hemp seed oil and other vegetable oils to run diesel engines. And so at that time, petroleum wasn't the predominant fuel. Most people grew their fuels, you know, their illuminants, they called it, for their lamps before electricity. And they'd eat the stuff left over. And with hemp, they called it gruel, which was a pretty basic food that was very high in the essential fatty acids, just like it is today. It's very healthy food. But the petrochemical industries realized that hemp was their main competitor, that hemp produced 3 times more seed oil than any other plant out there. And that's still true today. According to a study out of Notre Dame that was published in a magazine called The Midlands Naturalist back in 1975, this article is called Feral Hemp in Southern Illinois. According to that study, the wild hemp that was growing on the riverside in southern Illinois produced 4 tons of seeds. When you take 4 tons of seed and you press it, you get 300 gallons of oil. Now that oil is not only very nutritious, it can also be put right into any diesel engine, and with no conversion to the diesel engine, it can run your diesel engine. Now the other seed oil crops right now are soybeans, sunflower seeds, and canola, or rapeseed. You know, it's rapeseed, and then when they press it, they call it canola oil. Each of those produce 100 to 120 gallons of oil per acre. And you know, that's mainly what we're driving today when we're driving biodiesel vehicles. We're driving those seed oils, and it runs the diesel engines just fine, as most of us know. But hemp is 3 times more productive. And the byproduct from making oil from hemp is 3 tons of high protein. You start with 4 tons of hemp seeds, you press it, you get 300 gallons of oil and 4 tons of high protein hemp seed meal. Yeah. So that's not the only thing you get. You know, just think, if we, just with that alone though, if we grew all of our fuel from hemp, all those barrels of oil, for every barrel of oil, there's 50 gallons, there's going to be a half a ton of high protein hemp seed meal left over to wipe out world hunger. And then there's another byproduct, the fiber byproduct. You're going to get about 25 tons of hemp hurd fiber. Hemp herds also make paper. There's a bulletin from the USDA back in 1916, USDA Bulletin 404. Lester Dewey. It's called Hemp Herds as a Paper-Making Material. And that report said that hemp produces 4 times more paper per acre than trees. Well, that's a waste product when you're growing hemp for seed oil. And that waste product can make most of our paper needs and our building materials. You can glue that stuff together the same way they glue together wood fibers today. And then the other byproduct, not just is the hurd fiber, but also 6 to 8 tons of bast fiber. Now, that's the highest quality plant fiber you can have. It's used to make canvas, rope, lace, and linen. And in fact, a lot of the antique linens and laces out there are made from marijuana stems, from hemp fiber. And so your average acre of hemp is going to produce 300 gallons of oil, 3 tons of high protein hemp seed meal, 25 tons of hemp bast fiber for paper and building materials, and 6 to 10 tons of hemp herd fiber. Actually, the herd fiber is the 25 tons, and the bast fiber is the 6 to 10 tons, but the bast fiber can be used to make canvas, rope, lace, and linen. And I think it's the seed oil that's the real key here. And that when we legalize marijuana and allow unregulated industrial hemp to become predominant again, the petrochemical industries are going to lose their market hold. We're going to see a decentralization of the economy. We're not going to see the money being sent to the sheiks and the oil companies, the despotic governments around the world that depend on it in Nigeria and the Middle East. We're going to see the money going to the farmers and to the local economy. And that's the key. That's what the petrochemical industry does not want. They want us to keep pouring our money into their industries that are capital intensive. It takes so much money to drill for oil, none of us can compete. And it takes billions of dollars, tens of billions, to refine petroleum into all the different products we use to make from it today. But hemp seed oil and hemp, you get a seed oil press for $2,000, and any farmer can get all the oil he needs to run his tractors, feed his family, and ship the rest to support the local energy market. And I look forward to the day when that's going to happen. You know, what we are really here working for today is to end adult marijuana prohibition. We want to end adult marijuana prohibition. We want to make it legal. We want to see it where it's legally sold to adults over the counter. We want to see it where adults can grow their own with no license whatsoever. I mean, why? You know, you don't need a license to make your own beer or wine. It's only when you start selling it that you need a license. So we want to see unlicensed personal cultivation. We want to see unregulated hemp. Right now, you look at the industrial hemp market out there, and in Canada and Europe, they're limited to less than 1% THC, in some cases 0.5% THC in their plants. What they do, and that's why the petrochemical industries really allow that and support it, because what they do is they breed out the THC, and by breeding out the THC, they breed out the flowers. By breeding out the flowers, they're breeding out the seeds, and that's the food and the protein that hemp should be making. And when we restore it to its natural place, we're going to see a boom for all of our farmers, for all our local economies, and the decentralization of wealth as it should be, I think. So that's the dream, and that's what we're working for, to restore industrial hemp and to help medical marijuana patients. And I think, you know, we've got our clinics, and they've done a lot to help us get this thing going. But I look forward to the day when our clinics are put out of business by legal marijuana and unregulated industrial hemp. And that's what we're working for. We're working to make it where our clinics basically don't have a job anymore because people can grow their own without a license. And that'll be a happy day. And we're going to keep working toward it.
I was a battalion scout and point man, and any of you guys are veterans, you know what the hell a point man means. The life expectancy is about 30 minutes or so, something like that. And I was in a war history writing class with about 10 Vietnam guys, and I told them that I was a point man and scout. They says, "Oh, no, you weren't." And I says, "God damn it, yes, I was." And they said, "Nah, you weren't. If you were, you'd be dead." So here I am, mean as hell, and so forth. How many of you read the story in the Oregonian last week about the DEA trying to get hold of your patient's charts? How many of you raise your hands? You read that? Well, let me tell you, the DEA skunks and the local cops are all going crazy because you bastards have permits to use marijuana. And you have permits to grow it, and you have permits to carry it, permits to give it to somebody else and all that kind of stuff. And there are 15,000 of you guys with permits right now. 15,000 in Oregon. And about 7,000 caregiver growers. So that makes about 22,000 people who have the permits right now. Now, this is small potatoes because in California, there are over 300,000 people who have permits. Well, California, I understand, is a little bit larger than Oregon. You don't mind if I say Oregon, do you? You know? Well, I lived east of the Mississippi for about 20 years or so, and back there I was from Oregon, and that used to grate on my nerves. And so I finally figured out, thank God they've never been out here, because if they ever say that in the state of Oregon, they get somebody hit them over the head with a brick. Yeah! Thank you, sir, or madam. When the board took away my license in November 3 years ago, I was really disgusted with this because they thought that they were punishing me. They were not punishing me, they were punishing my 4,000 patients. And I get the idea that they were trying to stop the medical marijuana program. But as most of you know, the THC Foundation Clinic is probably seeing about 200 patients a week, and we're increasing the number of patients all the time. There are 2,200 doctors in Oregon now who are signing applications, 2,200 of them. And some of you know, many of you don't know, I'm actually an osteopathic doctor. And believe it or not, there are 200 osteopathic doctors who are signing these applications. And I thought I was the only one. And because I thought I was the only one, I was a real bad person. And that's one of the reasons why I'm wearing this cute thing right here. That I'm the most dangerous man in Oregon because it said so in the Oregonian.
We love you. We love you, Dr. Buck.
That reminds me, thank you very much. That reminds me of several years ago on our television program, a man phoned up and wanted to know if his medical condition would permit him to get a permit and so forth. And so he told me what his medical condition was, and I says, hell yes. I says, you're eligible, come on to the office. And he says, Dr. Levesque, I'd like to have a relationship with you. And I said, if you don't mind, please don't say that on television. So I hope you two guys don't want to have a relationship with me because I gave all that stuff up. I was a Boy Scout till I was 14, and then I became a Girl Scout. I have just started writing articles about medical marijuana. The website is called salem-news.com, and I try to write at least one article a week about all the sundry aspects of medical marijuana. What we're concentrating on right now is post-traumatic stress disorder. How many vets I got in the office here? You poor dumb bastards. Don't volunteer for shit. That's all I have to say. At any rate, even the Veterans Administration admits that they are failing to take care of post-traumatic stress patients, which is a real surprise because I was in the VA hospital about 50 years ago, and they told my mother on 3 occasions that we don't believe your son's going to make it. And I fooled them. And I survived. And then about 2 years later, I met one of my doctors in the hallway of the medical school, and he looks me up and down. He says, "You're Levesque, aren't you?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm Levesque." He says, "Well, are you a janitor here?" And I says, "No, I'm a PhD candidate." And he says, "Really?" I says, "What do you mean, really?" He says, "We never thought you'd be normal again. So if any of you think that I'm normal, you're crazier than hell." Now, do any of you have any questions of something or other? I have become one of the world's authorities on medical marijuana, so ask me anything. How do I qualify to get a card? Oh, okay. How bashful are you? Come up here and talk to me. Come on, get up here. Yay!
What about medical marijuana and ADHD? Has there been any
In what?
marijuana used for ADHD?
Oh, hey, that's a very good question. And fact of the matter is, over this past week, I wrote 2 articles about ADD and ADHD, and the California doctors. Hold my microphone by whose mouth? My mouth. Oh, okay. The doctors in California, and as far as I know, there are about 70 doctors in California who are writing these permits. But just like I say, they have written over 300,000 by now. And the DEA and the local cops are going crazy down there because, well, what the hell, you're just a bunch of potheads and you don't deserve even the time of day. So ADD and ADHD are good. Now, I was invited back to a subcommittee at Congress 3 years ago by Representative Souder from Indiana, and he represented Eli Lilly and Company in Indianapolis, who had just developed a new ADD, ADHD drug. And so what Souder wanted to do was to quash the medical marijuana in the United States completely. And so I was invited back there, and I was told by the Marijuana Policy Project that they were going to skin me alive. So I decided not to go. But the strain, now the Eli Lilly Company figured that the ADD drug would bring in $1 billion a year. But after it was released and used for about 6 months, they found out it didn't work. Now this is really crazy because marijuana does work for kids, and they don't smoke, but they eat it in cookies. How many of you are cookie eaters? How many of you are smokers? I don't know why in the hell I asked that. No, I don't. Well, that's not exactly true. About 6 years ago, my youngest son gave me a loaded bong for Christmas, and he says, "I'll dare you to light it up." Well, I think it was pretty bad grass or some goddamn thing. Probably Mexican mud, who knows, something like that. But anyway, I took a couple hits off, and I says, "Jesus Christ, what's so great about this stuff?" He said, "Well, you're not taking enough of it." How many of you have heard that? How many of you ever been high? How many of you been high twice? What'd you say?
About 37 years straight.
How many guys have been high 37 years straight? I think this is hilarious. Well, I will say that when I became a graduate student at the medical school, the first thing the chairman says, "Levesque, go into the stock room and see if you can straighten it out." So I went into the stock room, and the first thing that I found was a gallon jug of cannabis cough medicine. This was 13 years after it was declared illegal for anybody in the United States to have anything like that. And I said, well, it was made by Park Davis and Company, which is one of the largest in the world. And I poured myself a pint and I took it home and I tried it out and it works. And so I still have that pint someplace around my house, and I'll find it one of these days. But that was the only time that I actually smoked marijuana at that time. But I have used the tincture and I've used the oil, and they work fine for me. And how many of you ever had bad grass? Did you like it? Raise your hands if you enjoyed it. Didn't like it. Well, it's great that in British Columbia they're growing some of the best grass in the world. And some of the plants are being grown in the Portland area. You probably know that. How many of you know that? You know that? Very good. What do you want? This guy says he's going to cut my throat. So does anybody have any final question here to ask me? Don't get smart with me, fella. Glad to be here. I'm going to turn around and give you all a very short picture of cannabis therapeutics. Take a look at it. Isn't that more fun than it ought to be? Thank you very much. Do not smoke in the rain.
Yeah, give a hand to Joaquin, man. We're grooming him for success. He's on his way. You gotta bring the youth along, you know, if you're gonna call it a family band.
You should have treated it right. Whoa, yeah. Well, I read it in the scripture. I read it in the apocrypha. I read it in the scripture. I read it in the New Jerusalem. I read it in the scripture. That's a woman. Whoa, yeah. I want you to treat her right.
799-2055 or send an email to Lanny, Lanny, at marijuana news, one word, marijuananews.org. If you are interested in getting involved politically with the Democratic Party, if you're interested in forming the Brownie Mary Democratic Club within your state political party, call me. I will tell you how to do it, and you can become part of it's really, let me tell you, it's fun to be part of the political process because you get there and you get to meet all these politicians. I've met everybody from Nancy Pelosi to Governor Newsom to just all down the line through there. It's very, very exciting.
And if you are looking for a doctor to help you get a medical marijuana permit anywhere in the United States, we have a referral service. If you have any of these conditions or know someone that does, call us at 503-235-4606. That's 503-235-4606. I want to thank you for coming on, Lanny.
My pleasure,
Hopefully
Paul.
we'll have you back up here sometime soon. It's a long drive, I know. We're going to go out with a little bit of music from Quiltman, honoring John Trudell. We'll be out with live shows for the next 2 weeks, but we'll be back in the middle of July because our studio closes down for the holidays, and boys and girls clubs have some classes here. But I want to thank you for watching. Tune in next week and help us restore him. Good night.
Good words, good thoughts, good actions. Follow the sky into the blue. You are part sky, sky is part you. Oi, ah, oi, oi, ah, oi, oi, ah, and ah, yeah, hey, you. Oi, ah, hey, ah, oi, ah, oi, oi, ah, oi, oi, ah, ah. Good words, good thoughts, good actions. Follow the sky into the blue. You